All right, welcome everybody. Mike Hamilton here. I will be doing the presentation today, and that is my direct contact information you see on the lower left of your screen right now. So if you'd like to jot that down, feel free. Who is Mike Hamilton? My history is I've actually been in the tech doc industry for many, many years, from 1998 until 2005. I was the product manager for the Reusable program during the Blue Sky Software, eHelp, and Macromedia days. And then when Macromedia, back in February 2005, kind of fumbled the industry and fired the whole Reusable crew, I then became one of the founders over here at MadCap Software. So I've been in tech docs going way back to the WinHelp days, the early HTML help days, the transition to the web days. Should be able to handle just about any questions that come in. Now, the rough agenda that I have planned for us today, I'm going to start just who is MadCap Software. Now, I mentioned my background came from those Reusable help days. Well, all of the core founders came from kind of that ashes of the train wreck that Macromedia caused back in those days. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Then before we actually jump into a software demonstration, I do want to talk about some high-level concepts. The Flare authoring system definitely works a bit differently than something like using a word processor like Microsoft Word. All of its concepts are based around the fundamentals of content management. And if you haven't worked in a content management environment before, I want to make sure we have some core concepts down before we jump into the live demo portion. We're briefly going to touch on the workflow as a big diagram, and then the bulk of our time is going to be in live software demonstration. We're going to bring up the Flare interface, and we're going to walk through some typical publishing scenarios, authoring scenarios. So that is the agenda. So very quickly, who is MadCap Software? Well, we were founded in 2005. That is our office you see on screen there. And here's a bit of trivia for the old timers. I mentioned about our background with the Reusable help days. Well, when I was the product manager for Reusable help, it's a small world karma circle kind of a thing. We were actually in this very same building up until about 1999. And my office used to be up on the 3rd floor, right where the cursor is, right behind that tree there. And now fast forward, this is the headquarters for MadCap Software, and we have pretty much the entire 1st floor of the building. And when we outgrew that space, we've actually added a couple of other suites on other levels of the building as well. We are located in California, good old beautiful La Jolla, California. I know this might sound crazy in these crazy economic times, but we are profitable. In fact, we're hiring. So if you know any, C# programmers or tech support staff or anybody like that who's looking for work, have them check out our website. We've even managed double-digit year-on-year growth, even in these trying times. And we've basically established ourselves as the leader in technical communication software, specifically in that shrink-wrap software space. So it's not like the huge enterprise level where it takes 9 months to implement and hundreds of thousands of dollars and a team of consultants. People can buy a copy of Flare for less than $1,000, install it on a desktop, import some Word documents, and then within an hour can be publishing to the web. So it's designed to be completely a turnkey system. As far as industry standard goes, I just added up a quick list. I'm not going to go through them all, but these are all universities that have now adopted MadCap Software products in their technical writing curriculum. And it's people from Princeton to Carnegie Mellon to UCLA to, even overseas, Karlsruhe University in Germany, Swinburne University in Australia. So we're really happy about the growth that we've experienced. And then the obligatory, who are the customers slide. Well, this is just a tiny sample, and it runs the gamut. Everybody thinks of us as being in the software space, but that's just a small percentage of our customers. We have customers that are in manufacturing. We have customers in technology and software, in services, banking. and especially, we've done really well in the government sector. U.S. Army, Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Labor. We count them all as current customers. If you want a full list broken out by market segment, just go ahead and hop up to our website. And we've got this massive, under About Us, this massive page of existing customers. Alrighty, so that's the obligatory who is MadCap couple of slides. But now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I do want to talk about the products that we have available. The one that everybody knows us for is MadCap Flare, and that is our primary flagship product. It's everything anybody would need for importing existing legacy content, authoring or editing content, and publishing that content to print, to web, to all of these different mobile devices, PDF. Question came in, is MadCap Flare replacing FrameMaker? Well, we would love to, but since FrameMaker's from a different company, I want to be careful about how I answer that question. To kind of put that question in perspective, a lot of the existing tools in the industry that were built, going back to the early 90s, late 80s, they were designed to do one thing and one thing only. And the question actually mentioned FrameMaker. Well, FrameMaker was designed to be an amazing tool for doing print. And there were other tools that were amazing tools for doing web. And then there were other tools that were amazing tools for doing online help. The problem is, as times have evolved, we really have to do all of those things now. And so where a lot of these existing tools have tried to kind of bodge on additional functionality, it was actually a huge favor that Macromedia did for us when they fired us all back in 2005, because we had decades of knowledge and we had the chance to start fresh with all brand new technology. So this is a tool set that is designed to replace all of those old tools that were single focus with a product that just writes neutral content, and it doesn't become print or web or help or mobile until the moment you publish. It's a really good question. A question came in, can I increase the volume? I really don't have much control over the volume on this end. The best bet is to try adjusting the volume on your specific PC. All right, so MadCap Flare, that's the product everybody knows us for. Briefly, I just wanted to touch on the fact that we do have some other supporting pieces of software that are available. We have MadCap Contributor, which is specifically a tool for business professionals that maybe don't eat, sleep, and breathe documentation the way we do, but they're definitely a part of the process. So maybe it's somebody I need to be able to review the content that I write, or maybe there's an expert that needs to write 15 procedures for me. Well, the whole purpose of the contributor tool is to allow them to write in the native XML environment that Flare uses, but without the complexity of the full Flare package. You can almost think of it as like Flare Lite, and it's just for people who are doing reviews or are doing content authoring. They won't edit templates, they won't do publishing, they won't change style sheets. So it's a much lighter weight tool, just geared to those business professionals. In addition to that, we also have two multimedia tools. We have Mimic for your moving pictures and Capture for your static images. And whenever I show this slide, I always hear a groan. It's like, oh, there are 200 screen capture tools in the industry. Why in the world do we need another one? Well, the thing about Mimic and Capture, they are very different. We are looking to take the same content reuse techniques that we use in Flare and apply those to multimedia. So for example, if you need a text call out, either in a static graphic or in a training video, we will let you embed variable text in the text in the call out in the graphic, and that can be changed during publishing. So we're really kind of pioneering the use of XML metadata even inside multimedia. But for more details on those, we actually have some recorded demos on those products up on our website. For people who need translation or localization capabilities, we can actually provide a tool to manage that entire process and make it much easier than trying to do it by hand. And then we have two tools that are based on tracking, reporting, and analysis. The big difference is the analyzer tool looks inward on the documentation team, and it just looks for things like, any styles that are in use that have become orphans, and it will strip orphan styles out of 10,000 pages of information automatically. Or it can look for places where maybe a variable should have been used and it wasn't. And again, it can scan thousands of pages and look for problems like that and solve those. And then the feedback server, that is actually customer facing. So it actually will watch what content is being read, how often is it being read, what searches are the customers doing, what searches are they doing that aren't providing any results. And so you get all of these reports to know exactly if you're meeting your customer needs or not. And then it also has some Web 2.0 functionality. So customers can comment on topics, add their own information to topics, and really make it more of a community environment. A couple of questions came in. Define the difference between the terms net, web, and online. Really, that's kind of a personal preference there. When I think net and web, I pretty much think the same thing. Online is a bit different. That could mean inside the firewall in a company intranet. That could be on the World Wide Web, just on websites. But the nice thing is the same technology is in play in either case. Question, does Analyzer come with Flare? A light version of Analyzer does come with Flare. So a lot of the core basic reports are built right in. The Analyzer tool has about 45 additional functions it can run. So it can find linguistic issues and things like that. Other question, boy, questions are just flying in. Do you need to buy the entire suite for a complete authoring solution? Absolutely not. Everything I've just spoken of underneath Flare is completely optional. We have hundreds of customers that just buy a copy of Flare, and they can do all of their authoring, all of their publishing that they need. This whole suite of tools beneath Flare, they're completely optional, and they're just for those customers who get value from them. If you don't want to use our screen capture tool, Flare will work just fine with tools like Snagit or FullShot or any of the others that are out there. And so that's kind of a good segue. Let me go ahead and gray those out. With the 1 hour that we have, I'm not going to have time to demo everything, so we are going to focus this presentation exclusively, demonstration-wise, just on the MadCap Flare product. So with that, let me hop ahead here. I'm going to go ahead and jump into some of those concepts that I was talking about. Everything in Flare is based on the idea of topic-based authoring. It's very much a content management-based concept. We no longer write like in Word, where you start on page 1 and type, and you keep going until you hit page 200, and you have a long, linear document. The whole purpose of a tool like Flare is to maximize content reuse, and the primary way of doing that is breaking these long, linear documents into topics. So just what is a topic? Well, to kind of compare and contrast why we even need to go there, here's a scenario probably too many people are familiar with. You start with a Word document. Somebody says, hey, can you draft up an employee manual? Sure, no problem. We write something. We submit it. It's brilliant. The executive team loves it, except there's one little voice in the corner that says, well, wait a minute. We have two different benefits packages. We need one version for the hourly staff and a slightly different version for management. So what usually happens, you take that Word document, you make a copy, and now you have two versions of the exact same document. You make 5 or 6 edits to one version. They're still 98% identical, but you have 2 that you have to maintain now. Well, that's not too bad. And everything goes fine for about 6 or 8 weeks, and then you get another memo. It's like, ooh, wait a minute, this isn't going to work. We have offices in New York, in London, in Paris, in Los Angeles. Each office in their employee handbook needs to have the building floor plan, the emergency escape routes, the emergency telephone numbers, all of that. And so the number of documents starts multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. And next thing you know, you've got 16 almost identical versions, and it's a nightmare to maintain. And then to make matters worse, somebody from the executive team calls down and I'm like, what do you mean it's going to take a week? I just changed 2 paragraphs. Well, they don't realize that that 2-paragraph change has to be migrated through every single version. So this is the old way, big red X. This is what we have to get away from. It's inefficient. And if you go down to the root cause problem here, as long as we're trying to edit the individual deliverables, then we're chasing multiple versions. The goal is to get back to the very beginning where we had one master, one original. And now this used to work pretty well with some of the older tools if you were only doing print. The challenge these days is not only do we have this problem of redundancy, but it has to go to 16 different versions in print and 16 versions on the intranet and 16 different versions for mobile phones. So it's really compounding into even a bigger problem than what we used to have. So moving ahead, if you hop up to Wikipedia, there is a really good article about topic-based authoring, but it kind of drones on, I've cheated, I've pulled out some of the key core concepts, and I've switched them into a list format. So if you distill it down, this topic thing that we're speaking of, it's a discrete piece of content, it's focused about a specific subject, and it has an identifiable purpose. Typically, there are 3 different topic types for most documentation systems. Now, this is not set in stone. You can do anything you need to, but most teams will have task-type topics. You know, what are the steps I want people to accomplish? Supporting those are typically overview or domain knowledge type topics. And then you usually have some reference topics, just lookup type information. Beyond those core 3, different teams may have additional types. Some companies may have training topics. Some companies may have, you know, order processing topics. But for pure documentation, it's usually those core 3, tasks, overview, and reference. But the goal of those topics is to get content down to the smallest size possible so we can reuse it. But the biggest mistake new users make is this 4th bullet. A topic must be able to stand alone. It has to be a complete communication. So if this is a task, it should be the complete task, or at least a complete subtask if it's a very long process. And the reason for that, the whole goal at the end of this exercise is we want to end up with this pool of topics. They're basically reusable content objects. They're like little Lego bricks now. So if I have to do a set of FAQ pages, well, I might pull 15 of these together. If I have to do a getting started manual, I may pull 40 of them together and put them in a different order. But as long as each one is complete and standalone, well, I can put them back together in any order I want, and it's trivially easy. However, if I've written a bunch of fragments, well, trying to put these back together in any order that makes sense is almost impossible. And if you've talked to people who've said, oh yeah, we tried that topic-based authoring thing, writing was okay, but publishing was a nightmare, that's usually a red flag that they didn't quite understand and they were writing a bunch of fragments. And that just makes life difficult at the publishing phase, way beyond what it needs to be. So we want content as small as possible without it ever becoming a fragment. And that way it helps to ensure consistency. If I have this topic, adding users, and that needs to show up in a help system, that needs to show up in a user guide, that needs to show up in a quick start guide, well, I'm guaranteed consistency if it's the same topic being used in all three documents. So just by breaking into topics, that gets us 80% to document reuse or content reuse. The sticky bit about that last 20%, well, what if this topic, adding users here, what if I need 2 different levels of detail? What if I need one version for the day-to-day user, but I need a much deeper version for the system administrator? The new user really wants to create a second topic for the system administrator, and we don't want to do that. We don't ever want to duplicate content. So how do we make one topic serve multiple roles? Well, that's the second concept, and that's known as single source publishing. Traditionally, it's really a fancy phrase for we're going to use some XML metadata to identify content, even inside that topic. So single sourcing, the long blah blah version, it's the practice of maintaining content for multiple deliverables in a single source, in our case, those topics. And they're architected in a way that we can then use that metadata for publishing. Now, I find it makes much more sense in kind of a picture. So I'll pull up another example here. So here I have a topic. And the challenge I have, I'm trying to support 2 different versions of the same software. We have an enterprise version and we have a standard version. And I'm trying to support outputting not only to online help, but to print user guide manuals and to mobile documentation. So I've got various requirements for delivery. I have various requirements for the different types of or versions we're working with. So how in the world do we pull this off? Well, we do it using metadata. So this first opening paragraph, it is specific for the enterprise product. This second paragraph is specific to the standard version of our product. I will never include both when I publish. Now the next 3, those are common to both versions. So I just leave those alone. And then this last paragraph, for whatever reason, is deemed print only. Now that I've got my metadata in here, this can be mixed and matched and controlled a bunch of different ways. Now, in its raw state like this is great for authors, terrible for customers. I can't give this to a customer and say, yeah, ignore the green and the blue bits. They don't apply to you. That doesn't go over very well. What we have to do is go through an XML process known as a transform that takes our raw topics and converts them into something a customer can use. A PDF document, a Microsoft Word document, a website, a mobile EPUB format document, or something like that. Now, in Flare, we've tried to simplify things. There are various kinds of transforms. There's XSLFO for going to print. There's XSLT for going to web. There's assistive technologies like MathML if you have equations involved. A lot of alphabet soup. We've simplified. We just call them publishing targets. You tell Flare I need web. It's smart enough to use an XSLT process. You tell Flare you want PDF. It's smart enough to use an XSLFO process. So if you know what's going on behind the scenes, great, but you really don't need to. Now, the way this works, I will create one of these targets, and in this case, I want the enterprise version documentation, but I want it running on mobile phones. So I'll go into this target, and I'll set all of my rules. Any of my identified content, it either needs to be included or excluded with some Boolean logic. Any other attributes? Okay, this is going to mobile phones, so I want a mobile phone template for headers and footers. I can call that out. Maybe I want a specific set of style rules just for this particular output type. So once this is all set up, I can then have a different set of processing rules. And this will give me the browser version for online help. And I can have a third set of processing rules, the standard version of our software print manual. And we could keep going and keep adding these targets as long as we wanted to. Once we have this set up, it's now as simple as somebody walking into my office and saying, you know what, I need the mobile version for enterprise. We just right-click build, and what comes out? Enterprise content, common content, and it's on the mobile phones. I can do the same thing for browser help running inside of a modern web browser or a standard print document. So this is the whole goal. We are no longer, as authors, in the business of editing or building deliverables. We edit and write topics, and then from our topics, it's the system that does the actual building and publishing. And a question just came in. Flare doesn't seem to output to Word in a format that doesn't require tinkering with. Is there a way to fix that? Absolutely. Something has gone terribly wrong in your style sheets. And that is one of the things that new users especially have to expect. Even if you're an expert in Microsoft Word styles, there's a whole different world of style information to learn once you make a transition to an XML-based tool like Flare. The biggest difference between the average Flare user and the power Flare user isn't how well they know Flare. They both know Flare equally well. But the person who's deemed the power user also understands how to harness cascading style sheets, the style language used for XML. Alrighty, so that's the overall workflow diagram, or conceptually. The actual workflow that most customers would use, it's usually a three-step process. The first step is taking existing content that you already have lying around. We don't want people to have to recreate anything. So if you have, thousands of data topics, or Microsoft Word documents, or FrameMaker documents, or any loose HTML or XHTML files, we can pull all of that content in, and that disparate content all becomes one common set of topics now that we can pull from when we do our publishing. Once inside Flare, then there's a great editor we're going to look at here in a moment where I can edit any of the imported content. I can create new topics. We can add all of that metadata. It's a nice visual editor, so we don't have to be poking around in the XML code if we don't want to, but it is available if we have those skills. And then the third step is that publishing step. And all of the transforms are baked right in. We don't have to have programmers. We don't have to have, super technical staff. The main, I've categorized these. I'm not going to go through them all, but for print outputs, direct to PDF is probably the most common, outputting to Microsoft Word right behind that. For browser-based publishing, two different options. If you need to support old legacy browsers, like going back to Internet Explorer 6 and things like that, then we have a format we call Web Help. Uses some older web technology called frame sets, very reliable in the older browsers. But if you're looking more to the future, then we also support an HTML5 with CSS3 output as well. Beautiful output, maximized for search engine optimization, but doesn't go back in some of the older browsers. So we give people choices there. Same thing with mobile publishing. If you need offline capabilities, we support the EPUB format. If you prefer online, always up-to-date publishing, then we have what we call Web Help Mobile. It's a browser-based design that has been tested on iPhone Android, Windows Mobile, and BlackBerry devices. And the nice thing about that, you just generate one doc set for mobile, and it works on all those devices. You don't have to do a custom build for each type. The desktop help formats, and then we can output to things like DITA or in XHTML ebook format as well. So some of our customers only ever use one format. We have others that use 8 or 9 of these. Completely the customer's choice. But that is the typical workflow. Importing existing, authoring and editing, and then the publishing phase. Question, can you import Adobe InDesign files? At this time, we don't have an InDesign import capability. We definitely have developers working on that direction, but it's not anything in the product yet. Question, will the web output formats handle any JavaScript code that you add to it? Oh, absolutely. We even make it extremely easy. If it's a one of JavaScript, it can be added directly to a particular topic. If it's a global JavaScript that you want to be available in every topic, then we have a technology called a master page. You can drop that JavaScript in one place, and it automatically gets added to every topic. Can we do context-sensitive help linking with an application? Absolutely, either desktop or web-based application. Alrighty, lots of questions flying in, but I'm going to jump back into the slide deck here a little bit so we don't run out of time, and I'll come back to the questions once we get to the end. All right, so that's all the slides. I'm getting kind of slided out here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the live Flare environment now. And for those folks who haven't seen it at all, I'm going to start with the big picture view. Whenever you open the Flare application, this start page is the first thing you're going to see. And all of the old-timers immediately jump past this. But for new folks, I do want to point out there's some good stuff here. On the left, here's a list of all of the recent projects that I've worked on. So I don't have to go spelunking around my hard drive and figure out where they are. I can just grab them, the most recent ones. But especially for new users, this Getting Started area on the right, it has links to all of the documentation, the PDF guides, but most importantly, we've included about 3 hours of video tutorials. And you can just hit that link, hop right into the video tutorials. They've been broken down into 3 to 5 minute segments, so you don't have to, devote an entire 3 hours. You can do it a piece at a time, and it's designed to really walk you through a lot of those core concepts, first things you need to know. And it's available not only in Flare, but if you don't want to install anything, you can actually hop up to our website in the tech support area, and you can view those same videos up there. Question, could we replace XMetal with Flare? A lot of that depends on what you're trying to do. We have a lot of customers who have done exactly that. We have a lot of customers that went down the path of trying to use DITA with something like XMetal or Oxygen, and authoring was great, but they were just hemorrhaging money paying developers to always update and maintain their transforms. So if that's kind of the thing you're talking about, absolutely. There is no functionality in DITA that we don't replicate, even down to things like relationship tables, advanced linking structures, conrefs. We have all of that support. However, we are not doing native DITA authoring. So it is using a hybrid approach, using 2 different simultaneous schema. We use the XHTML schema to validate all of the visible content, but then by namespace call, we augment that with a MadCap schema that adds support for conditional markers and variables and snippet files, all the advanced content management functionality. So functionally, can we replace it? Absolutely. Can you pick any arbitrary schema and use it at Flare? Not currently. Alrighty, but off of the questions and back in. So we talked about the start page, we talked about the video tutorials. Again, the way most people are going to start is by importing existing content. So I can hop up to my File tab. I could say New Project, and we can build a new Flare project, like I mentioned earlier, from Word documents, from FrameMaker documents, from an old RoboHelp project, DITA files. Very quickly, I'm just going to walk through a Word example. So I'm going to import a new project. Project name, we'll call this Demo Word Import. And by default, it will be stored on my local hard drive. That is not a requirement. I know a lot of the older tools, it had to be on your local hard drive. With Flare, there is no hidden database behind the scenes. I can store it on my local drive. I can store it on an external drive. I can store it on a network. Or I could even store it in a source control repository. So if I want to link to Team Foundation Server or Subversion or something like that, that's my choice. For this demo, I'm just going to keep it simple and go local hard drive. And now at this point, Flare says, okay, where are these Word documents? So I'll click Add Files. And I don't have to do it file by file. I can select as many Word documents as I want. And I'll click Open. So now all 4 Word documents are listed. And I'll click Next. And that's actually going to trigger Flare to analyze and scan these Word documents. And what it's looking for is what templates are in use, what styles are in use, what data can be extracted. And that brings me to my first decision point. We're trying to go to topics, but these could be 200 or 300 page Word documents. How do we break those into topics? Well, I'm going to tell Flare every time you find a heading 1 or a heading 2, go ahead and use those as breakpoints for creating new topics. Then it wants to know how I want to handle styles. I'm just going to use the defaults for now, but there are mapping capabilities. So if you don't want Flare to create a new style sheet based on the Word styles, you can say, okay, nope, I just want to map those Word styles to my existing style sheet. I would do that by clicking the style sheet button and linking to a style sheet I want to map to. But in this case, I'm just going to let Flare create a whole new one based on the Word styles. And then last are style mapping options. Now I'm going to keep things simple here. I'm just going to map all of these custom Word styles to be paragraph styles. Some custom heading styles, I'll map those. And you don't have to map exactly like I did. You may decide that in the Word document, anything that's a heading 1 or a heading 2 should become a heading 1. You can do all of that mapping. Once I've finished my paragraph styles, I can map character styles. Once I'm done with that, I click Finish. And Flare is actually going to be nice enough to give me a preview. I don't have to commit to this import until I look at the preview. And I can see the way graphics are going to come in. I can see the topics that are going to be created, what size they're going to be. And as long as I'm happy, at this point, I just click Accept, and that Word content becomes a Flare project. Now, if I'm not happy for any reason, maybe I decide, oh, I got too aggressive, I've got too many topics, and they're too short, they're fragments. I just click Cancel, and I can actually back up through this, and I can see, you know what, don't break on heading 2s, let's take those out of the mix, just break on heading 1s, and now I click Finish again, and now you can see it produced far fewer number of topics, but those topics end up being much longer. So it allows me to iterate until I get the exact settings I want, and only then I click Accept, and it becomes a Flare project. Now, for the sake of time, I am going to click Cancel because I have a Flare project open with a lot more content than just a couple of Word documents. Question, can I import a smaller Flare project into a larger Flare project? Oh, absolutely. If I go to my Project ribbon and I choose import, I can actually import another Flare project. That has been built in since about version 3, I believe. All right, but kind of stepping back a bit, you'll notice on the right we have a visual editor. I do not call it WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get. That's kind of a legacy term. It goes back to the word processing days. Anybody who's trying to tell you they have an XML tool and they call it WYSIWYG, that should be a big red flag. Once we get into the world of XML, what you see is just one possibility. All somebody has to do is change the output transform. If they change the styles, all bets are off. And instead of being a bad thing, we actually use that. So right now, I'm basically in a web layout mode. But maybe today I care more about print publishing. I can actually switch the editor from web mode to print mode. And now Flare is going to redraw my workspace, but using my own publishing templates. And right now I'm set for letter-sized publishing. So it's rendering using my margins, my headers, my footers. If I were set up to do European A4 type publishing, well, again, it would re-render my workspace. So it is using my own templates. And I can even go so far as to say, okay, it's great we've reformatted the page, but I have some custom print styles I want to use. So I can actually change my style medium to print. And now everything is switched to Times New Roman even. So it is very modular, and you can hop back and forth. Now where that can really come in handy, and I'm sure this never happens to anybody on this demo, but let's say my developers are working on a new dialogue, and I need a screenshot of it, and I give them explicit instructions. I need it to be exactly 400 pixels wide, 300 pixels tall. And what does the engineer do? Well, they actually create this huge, massive, full desktop screen grab and give it to me, and then I'm kind of stuck. So what it looks like is something like this massive screenshot. Well, with most older tools at that point, you're stuck. You either have to go back to the engineer, ask for a new screenshot, or you have to ship this off to the graphics team and see if they can massage it a bit. But here is where we super leverage cascading style sheets. I'm going to right-click, actually, and before I do that, now what would be wrong with using this graphic? Well, in a web environment, it wouldn't be great, but they could side scroll. Yeah, not great, but it might work. But let's hop back to that print layout. And right away, I can see that graphic. It runs right past my margin, right off the page. I didn't have to do any publishing to see this. I didn't have to build a PDF just to find out that, oh, it's not going to work. I could just toggle my workspace back and forth. So that's nice to be able to spot things like this. But how do I fix it? Check this out. I'm going to go right-click on the graphic, choose Style Class, and I actually have a particular style I've already created called Max Width for Print. Now, before I apply that, Flare has something called a medium setting in the style sheet. So what I've done is I've actually created one style. It's called Max Width for Print, but it has two different rules on it. For print publishing, it says this graphic can be no wider than 3 inches. But for web or help publishing, it says automatically make this a thumbnail. So if I select that option, well, in my web view, I see the thumbnail. If I switch over to my print layout, well, here it's exactly 3 inches wide. So with one style, I was able to fix and salvage that bad screenshot the developer gave me. Now, if I want to actually test this, there is a preview option. So I can preview this just by selecting the preview option. And so here's that automatic thumbnail capability just by applying a style. And if I click on this, well, it zooms in. I get the nice full screenshot. And now if I click off of it, then it goes right back to being a thumbnail for me. Well, what about that print output? Well, let me generate a single page PDF. So I don't want to waste time building this massive document. I just want to make sure this graphic's going to work okay. So I chose to preview, but preview as PDF. And here's that topic. Now it obviously fits, but what's the quality? I'm going to zoom in here. And you'll notice that that graphic is pristine. We have not lost a single pixel in that process. So the days of having to insert multiple graphics and then conditional markers, this one's for print, this one's for online, forget those crazy days. I can use one graphic, and simply through styles, I can make that one graphic pull multiple duties. All right, so that was basic graphic usage. Boy, time is getting away from me here. Some other cool things that I can do inside the editor. A lot of our customers use lists a lot. So we put a lot of work into our list handling and our table handling both. Now, for those of you coming from a FrameMaker background, you'll be happy to know we fully support auto number styles. So if you want to do numbering and list handling using auto number paragraph styles, you can absolutely do that. The traditional method, though, is using element-based lists. Now, in this case, I'm going to turn on what we call the visual structure bars. This lets me see the structure of the underlying XML without having to go into a code view. Now, if you want to, you absolutely can. Let me click Save here. Right here on the far right, I can click this little icon, and I can jump right into a code view. If you want full XML access, you know, full syntax color coding, line numbering, the whole thing. But I have to admit, usually when I show this during a demo, I lose half my attendees. So I'm going to hop right back again. What we wanted to do was, how do you get the benefits of seeing that structure, but without being stuck in a code view? Well, that's where these structure bars came from. And I am proud to say we were actually awarded a patent on this technology, so it is unique to us. And what's unique is it's not only for looks. If bullet 4 is in the wrong place, instead of cut, copy, paste, break list, fix list, I can just grab that block that represents the list item, and I can do a drag, and that blue arrow will show me wherever it's legal to drop that item. And it's not just the text that moves, the entire bullet moves. So I don't have to renumber or anything like that. And then another challenge, I'm going to copy this entire list and plug it in way down the page. So here's a pretend scenario. I've got steps 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after step 4, I need a big flowchart graphic and 2 supporting paragraphs and a bunch of content. And then way down the page, I want 5, 6, 7, 8. That was easy in desktop publishing. That's been crazy hard in XML-based tools. We decided it shouldn't be that hard. I can just right-click on my list now, and I can say sort, reverse, or in this case, continue sequence. This lower list just became a continuation of the upper list. I add a new item to the upper list, the lower list renumbers automatically. So we're really trying to not hide the fact that it's XML, but not let that be a crutch as to why we lost certain functionality from things like Microsoft Word. We're trying to bridge that gap. One of the last things I want to show is our table handling, because so many people in tech docs use tables. Well, it looks like I have the same table in here twice. I've cheated. It's the same content, but these are 2 very different tables. This first table, this is your traditional table like you would get in Microsoft Word. If I want to change the header color background, I highlight those cells, I apply a new color. Let's do pink, what the heck. And, you know, my table takes on that shading. Works great, exactly like I'd expect. But if I have 500 tables in 500 topics and I want them all to look the same, I now have to go hand edit every single one. Very tedious. Well, this lower table is being driven by a style sheet. I'm going to right-click inside this table, Table Style, Edit Style. This is going to bring up a dedicated style sheet editor just for tables. Now, something else that's cool, I can peel this editor out of my workspace. I'm just going to right-click and choose Float as an option here. That's going to put the editor into its own window. And if I've got dual monitors, I can put this on my second monitor. Or in this case, for the presentation, I'm just going to float it in the top corner. This way we can still see the table. But here, I can come in, and I can say header row, background color, and green. I get this nice preview. If I save this now, well, not only did this table just update, but if all 500 tables in this project are linked to this style sheet, all 500 tables just updated simultaneously. And then if I want to get really fancy, let's say I want to make it easier to read the rows, if I go to the Row tab, there's actually a pattern editor. And the default is just white rows. But I can add a second pattern. On that second pattern, I can add a color and a separator line. And if I hit Save, well, I just updated 500 tables to an accounting spreadsheet look. Now, what's nice about that, could I do that manually? Absolutely. But it becomes a maintenance nightmare, because what happens if I need a new row between Bill and Sharon? Should the new row be white or green? Well, it's going to break either way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right-click on the Bill row, insert a new row below, and because of that style sheet, the remainder of the table completely remapped automatically. That also works with that conditional publishing I was talking about. If I mark these 3 rows as confidential and I remove them during a publishing, well, I won't end up with George and John both being green rows. John will go back to being white, Larry will become green, it becomes self-healing. Even though I've removed 3 rows, the customer will never be able to tell that I've done it. All right, so I think we've touched a bit on the editor here. So we talked about importing, we've talked about the editor, we have a couple of minutes left. I do want to talk about publishing now. Once we've done all of this, how do we get it out of Flare? Well, I'm going to switch over to the project view, and it's basically 2 requirements. One, I have to create a table of contents. This is simply a map that tells Flare of these hundreds and hundreds of topics. Here are the ones that I want published, and here's how I want them organized, what order I want them in. Once I have that defined, the last step is one of those targets that we talked about. And I don't have time to go through every tab, but I've told it to build web output. I've told it to use a particular table of content so it knows what topics. If I've used conditional markers, I can go through and just mark what needs to be included, what needs to be removed. And when I'm done, I can just click Build. And Flare is going to give me this map of everything that it's doing, every file that gets touched. And in this case, I've told it that accessibility is a requirement. And so this Errors tab popped up, and anywhere I violated accessibility, anywhere I forgot to put in an alt text field, anywhere where I forgot to put in a long description field, it will flag. I click View Output. Well, here is the content that was in Flare just a minute ago, and it's now running inside my browser. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the whole process. Concepts, importing, a bit of authoring, and then very quickly publishing options. Now, I did use the stock templates. You can go in, you can remove the MadCap logo, you can change it to your own logo. In fact, I have a couple of examples. Here is the stock MadCap Flare online help system. But here is a customer example. And they just went in, they modified what we call a skin file, applied their own style sheets, and they had completely custom graphics. And for those customers who want to get away from the traditional tri-pane where navigation's on the left, content's on the right, we even have customers like Baumgar. Everything you see on screen here was published directly out of MadCap Flare. They've just finessed the templates a little bit. All right, so with that, it's going to wrap up the official presentation. So I am going to go ahead and put the slides back up. And for those of you who are live, if you need to drop off, I totally appreciate scheduling issues and things like that. For those who are here for the recording, I am going to stick around and try and get to as many questions as I can, because there have been a bunch popping in the Q&A window. So for those live folks who need to drop off, I totally understand. I'm going to go back to the Q&A now. All righty. What is the best book to buy to learn your product? Well, we'd like to be, pretty proud and say that all the documentation you need, we provide for free. But I also realize a lot of people just really enjoy having a third-party book. If you hop up to our blog that we maintain on our site, do a search. There's a topic I wrote many moons ago called the MadCap Flare Recommended Reading List. And there are actually several third-party books listed that I recommend. The ISBN numbers, how to look them up, the whole thing is up on our blog. Short of that, if you send me an email direct, I'll just send you a link right to that page in the blog. Let's see. About importing Flare project. Is this what creates parent-child projects or global projects? It can. When I import another Flare project, I have two options. Just import it and make it part of this project, break any kind of connection, or I can import an external Flare project into this one and say stay synchronized. And that's what we would call a global project. So it can be a one-time or synchronous. Can you import Captivate movie files and use them in Flare? Absolutely. Yes, we have our Mimic tool, but you can also import Captivate movies, Camtasia movies, just any standard video file, be it Flash movies or MP4s or WMVs or anything like that. Can you create print templates that have 2 or more columns? Absolutely. We didn't have time in this demo, but we have something called a page layout editor. And in the page layout editor, you actually define, for lack of a better term, your print stationery, your odd pages, your even pages. That's when you could go in and actually set up the multiple column look. With CSS, is there a need to create templates in Flare? Absolutely, the two work hand in hand. Templates are great. For example, let's say I need somebody to write a procedure topic. Well, the template will put all of the core subheadings in there, all the sections I need to fill out. So that's one piece, but then how they look, how they act, how they feel, that would be the cascading style sheet component. What is the definition of accessibility? We test for Section 508 compliance, which kind of basically means WCAG at the same time. Can I provide URLs to other recorded webinars? Off the top of my head, I can't. But again, if you shoot me an email to the email address you see on screen, I can get you a link to our page that has all of our recordings on it. How will you find the recording of this demonstration? Anybody who registered will automatically get an email in the next 24 hours or so telling you where this recording was placed on the web. Can I show you the text in the CSS for that max width thumbnail style I talked about? Yeah, not easily. Again, shoot me an email. I can get you a quick screen grab. I don't want to kind of fumble around and try and find it. Is it difficult to create a new skin? It's not difficult. depending on what you're trying to do. Let me pull up some examples here. So here's an example of Salesforce.com. They used our stock skin. All they did was they took out the MadCap logo, put in their logo, and they changed the colors. But they kept all of our stock icons. Something like that can be done in a couple of hours. On the other hand, we have a customer called ArcWeb. They went whole hog. They replaced all of the stock icons with their own custom icons. Even the navigation icons were changed out all the way down. It's very subtle, but there's actually a special background graphic behind the entire toolbar. This actually took them several days working with their graphics department. So is it hard to change? It depends on at what level. If, like Salesforce, you just want to match your company colors, your company look and feel, put your logo in there, that's trivially easy. To totally customize the whole thing is a bit more work. Question, is affordable online training available for individuals? Again, there's about 3 hours of built-in video tutorials. If you hop up to our website in the tech support area, our tech support team does webinars every month, and those have been stacking up, so I would guess there's probably another 5 or 6 hours of tech support video training available. That is all free all the time. Can you get a free trial version? Absolutely. Hop up to our website. You can download a copy of Flare. It works completely free for 30 days. Or any of the other tools I showed at the very beginning. Those are all available as trial versions as well. Can you compile a Japanese manual under an English operating system? Shouldn't be a problem. I will admit that's not my area of expertise, but just for giggles, I'm going to go ahead and close Flare and then open it again. And if you want to run Flare in Japanese. Now, this is going to be completely useless to me. I can neither read nor write Japanese, but you can actually run Flare in your choice of 4 different languages: English, Japanese, German, or French. And that has no bearing on the content that you write. So you can actually run Flare completely in Japanese and be writing German topics inside the editor. Completely up to you. Everything is Unicode-based, so it doesn't have the legacy issues of the older tools using those ASCII maps. Now, I am going to close this and put it back into English mode, though. Otherwise, it's completely useless for me. Can I go over how to change colors in a skin file? That's getting a little bit deep, but what the heck, I'm feeling froggy. All right, so I just opened up the project that we were demoing a minute ago. If I go to the Project Organizer tab in the lower left, and I go to Skins, I'm going to go ahead and open one up that's been customized a bit already. So on the General tab, it's what navigation elements, size, the About graphic that comes up. To change colors, ignore all this stuff and go down to Styles. Everything is in this Styles list. So let's say I want to change the color of those navigation elements in the lower left. Those are known as accordion items. I'll select accordion item, and it's not great at low resolution like this, but if I scroll down, there's actually a little graphic here. I know I'll cheat. I'll get some space back, minimize the ribbon. There we go. This will actually show me what I'm editing down here. It's a little graphic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose accordion item and believe it's under font. There we go, background gradient and background gradient hover. So those are the colors I would change, and that would completely change the gradient color on those navigation items. Are there sample documents available for going through the learning curve? Absolutely. We have a bunch of sample projects that are built in, sample topic templates, sample page layout templates. Everything in Flare is built from templates. Question, in a multi-author environment where only one person does the publishing, can all of the other writers use the contributor tool with one person having a copy of Flare? Potentially. The thing you have to be careful of, though, is it's not just publishing. The people who use contributor cannot create or edit a table of contents. They cannot edit or create templates or edit style sheets. It's really almost forms-based writing for the people who are using contributor. But if that model fits what you're looking for, then absolutely. All right, with that, I'm about 10 minutes over. I do want to keep this a manageable sized recording, so I am going to apologize, but I am going to wrap things up at this point. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address back up one last time as we wrap up, but thank you so much, everybody, for participating. I do hope this was helpful and beneficial. Feel free to send me any other questions. If I missed something, they were scrolling by fairly quickly, but thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.